In 1947, a farm wife in Iowa woke to discover that the well pump had frozen overnight. No running water meant no cooking water, no cleaning water, no water to mix with animal feed. By noon, she had served lunch to her husband, 3 children, and 2 hired hands, using only ingredients that required no water and no cooking. The meal was not planned. It was not in any cookbook. It existed because she understood what food actually was and what could be done with it under any circumstances. Number 19 on this list was made from an ingredient that most modern cooks have never seen and would not recognize as edible. Number 12 required understanding animal biology well enough to know which parts were safe to eat within 12 hours of slaughter, but would make you sick if eaten on day 2. And number 1, the dish that appeared at farm tables across America whenever the garden produced too much of something, used a preservation technique that modern food safety guidelines say is dangerous, but that kept farm families healthy for 200 years. These dishes were not recipes. They were responses. The garden produced, the chickens laid, the pig was slaughtered, the weather changed. And the farm wife looked at what she had that day and made food from it. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to learn is why modern cooking, with its precise measurements and specific ingredients, would have been impossible on a farm where nothing was guaranteed and everything was in flux. Let us count down. Number 25, skillet bread. From biscuit dough gone wrong. When biscuit dough did not rise properly, or when there was not enough dough to make a full batch of biscuits, or when the oven was already full with other things, the dough was pressed flat into a hot cast iron skillet and fried on the stove top. The bread came out flat, dense, and crispy on the outside. It was not biscuits, it was not cornbread. It was what you made when the plan failed, and you needed bread anyway. Flour was bought in 50-pound sacks that cost approximately $2 in 1948. The sack lasted a month. Biscuit dough that failed was not wasted. It was transformed through heat and fat. The skillet bread was split and buttered, or used to sop gravy, or eaten with preserves. The bread tasted different each time because it was made from whatever dough had gone wrong, which meant the proportions varied. This was not seen as a problem. This was understood as normal. Farm cooking did not aim for consistency. It aimed for using what existed. Number 24, wilted lettuce with bacon and hard-boiled eggs. In late spring, when the garden produced more lettuce than could be eaten fresh, the excess was wilted. Bacon was fried until crisp. The bacon was removed and crumbled. Hot bacon grease was poured over the lettuce, wilting it instantly. Vinegar was splashed into the hot grease, creating a simple dressing. Hard-boiled eggs were sliced over the top, and the crumbled bacon was added. This was dinner. The lettuce cost nothing because it came from the garden. The bacon was from a hog slaughtered months earlier. The eggs came from chickens. The only purchased ingredient was vinegar, which cost about 15 cents per bottle and lasted for months. Wilted lettuce with bacon and eggs delivered complete protein from the eggs and bacon, vitamins from the greens, and fat from the bacon grease. The meal happened when the lettuce bolted, which meant it would turn bitter within days. The wilting was not a recipe. It was a response to surplus that would otherwise be lost. Number 23, chicken and dumplings made from an old hen. When a hen stopped laying eggs, she was killed and cooked. Old hens were too tough for frying or roasting. They required long, slow cooking to become tender. The hen was simmered for 3 to 4 hours until the meat fell from the bones. The bones were removed. Dumpling batter, just flour, salt, and water, was dropped by spoonfuls into the simmering broth. The dumplings cooked in the chicken-flavored liquid and absorbed the flavor. This meal used a bird that would otherwise have no purpose. The hen's productive life as an egg layer was over. Her meat was not tender enough for preferred preparations. The solution was to adapt the preparation to the ingredient. The chicken and dumplings were not made because someone wanted chicken and dumplings. They were made because a hen stopped laying. Number 22. Fried green tomatoes. At the end of summer, frost threatened. The tomato plants still had green tomatoes that would not ripen in time. The unripe tomatoes were picked, sliced, dredged in cornmeal, and fried in bacon grease. The tomatoes were tart and firm, nothing like ripe tomatoes. They were eaten not because green tomatoes were preferred, but because green tomatoes were what the garden gave before frost killed everything. A basket of green tomatoes represented food that would be lost if not preserved or cooked immediately. Frying transformed the unripe vegetables into something edible. The fried green tomatoes were served alongside whatever meat and other vegetables were available. They were not a special dish. They were the solution to threatened waste. Number 21. Head cheese. When a hog was slaughtered, everything was used. The head was split, cleaned, and simmered for hours until all the meat was tender and the bones released their gelatin. The meat was picked from the bones, chopped fine, and mixed with the concentrated cooking liquid. The mixture was poured into pans and chilled. The gelatin from the bones set the mixture into a solid loaf that could be sliced. Head cheese cost nothing beyond the time to make it because the head was part of the hog that was already slaughtered for other cuts. The head cheese provided protein and fat through winter months when fresh meat was scarce. The dish exists because farms slaughtered their own animals, and using the entire animal was economic necessity. Head cheese vanished when people stopped butchering their own meat, and when the appearance of meat held together by gelatin became unappetizing. Number 20. Scrambled eggs with whatever vegetables were ready. Eggs were gathered each morning. The garden was checked for whatever was ready to pick. Early summer might be peas and green onions. Midsummer might be tomatoes and peppers. Late summer might be squash and beans. Whatever was picked was diced and scrambled with eggs. The combination changed daily based on what the garden produced. The eggs cost nothing because chickens laid them. The vegetables cost nothing because the garden grew them. This breakfast provided complete protein from eggs and vitamins from vegetables. The preparation was not planned, it was responsive. You gathered eggs, you picked what was ready, you combined them. This is improvisation based on availability, which was the foundation of all farm cooking. Number 19. Fried pork belly with milk gravy. Fresh pork belly, the uncured version of bacon, was sliced thick and fried slowly until the fat rendered and the meat became crispy. The pork was removed and flour was stirred into the fat. Milk was added and the mixture became a rich gravy. The gravy was poured over biscuits or potatoes, and the pork belly was eaten alongside. This meal turned up within days of hoggy slaughter, when fresh pork was abundant. Pork belly cost nothing because it came from the farm's own hog. The meal delivered intense fat and protein. It appeared only during hog slaughter season because pork belly was eaten fresh and not preserved. The seasonal limitation was not seen as a restriction. It was understood as the rhythm of farm life. Certain foods appeared at certain times because that is when the animals were ready. Number 18. Corn pudding from field corn. Field corn, the type grown for animal feed, was picked young when the kernels were still tender. The kernels were cut from the cob and mixed with eggs, milk, a little flour, and salt. The mixture was baked until set. Field corn was starchier and less sweet than sweet corn, but when picked young it was edible for humans. The pudding used field corn because that was what the farm grew in quantity. Sweet corn was a garden crop planted in small amounts. Field corn was a field crop planted by the acre. The transformation happened through eggs and milk and baking. Corn pudding turned what was otherwise animal feed into human food. The pudding cost nothing because all the ingredients came from the farm. It appeared in late summer when corn was ready and eggs and milk were abundant. Number 17. Cream gravy with no cream. Flour was browned in meat drippings, then milk was added until the mixture thickened into gravy. People called it cream gravy even though it contained no cream, because the milk made it pale and thick. The gravy was served over biscuits, fried meat, or vegetables. It appeared at breakfast, dinner, and supper whenever there were meat drippings and milk. The milk came from the farm cow. The drippings came from whatever meat had been cooked. The gravy transformed simple components into something that felt rich. The name cream suggested a luxury that did not exist in the ingredients. The gravy was not luxury, it was the farm version of making fat and flour into something that elevated plain food. Number 16. Green beans cooked with new potatoes and bacon. In midsummer, when both green beans and new potatoes were ready, they were cooked together with a piece of bacon or a ham hock. The combination simmered for hours until the beans were very tender and the potatoes had absorbed the smoky meat flavor. This was dinner. The beans and potatoes came from the garden. The bacon or ham came from preserved pork. The dish cost nothing and fed the family completely. The timing was not planned, it was determined by when both the beans and potatoes reached the right stage at the same time. The cooking time, hours of simmering, was not seen as excessive because farm stoves were always going and simmering pots required no attention. Number 15. Sausage made from scraps. When a hog was butchered, all the trim, the pieces too small to be roasts or chops, went into sausage. The meat was ground, seasoned with salt, pepper, and sage, and stuffed into casings made from the hog's own intestines. The sausage was fresh for a few days, then smoked or cured for preservation. Fresh sausage appeared at breakfast. Cured sausage appeared throughout the year. The sausage represented a use for meat that would otherwise have no purpose. Scraps alone were not meals. Ground and seasoned into sausage, the scraps became breakfast meat that lasted for months. The transformation required knowledge of butchering, grinding, seasoning, and preserving. All of it was considered basic farm knowledge that every woman needed. Number 14. Pork and beans with salt pork. Dried beans were soaked overnight, then simmered with a large piece of salt pork until both the beans and the pork were tender. The salt pork provided flavor and some fat. The beans provided protein and bulk. This meal appeared throughout winter, when fresh vegetables were unavailable and when preserved pork was the only meat. A pot of pork and beans cost approximately 20 cents for the dried beans. The salt pork came from the farm's preserved pork supply. The pot fed 6 people for 2 meals. The dish required no planning beyond soaking the beans the night before. It was the default winter dinner when nothing else was available. Number 13. Fried apples with pork chops. In fall, when apples were abundant, they were sliced and fried in the same pan as pork chops. The apples cooked in pork fat and absorbed the savory flavor. The apples provided sweetness that balanced the rich pork. The combination appeared in fall only, when apples were fresh. Fried apples with pork chops were not a planned menu item. They were what happened when apples were ripe and a hog had just been slaughtered. The seasonal alignment created the dish. The dish disappeared when the season ended. Number 12. Liver and onions within hours of slaughter. When a hog or a cow was slaughtered, the liver was eaten immediately. Liver spoils faster than muscle meat. It had to be consumed within 12 hours or preserved right away by canning or curing. Fresh liver was sliced thin, dredged in flour, and fried with onions. The liver provided intense nutrition, including iron and B vitamins. It appeared only on slaughter day. You could not plan to eat liver on Tuesday. You ate liver on whatever day the animal was slaughtered. The timing determined the menu. Farm families ate according to what the farm produced on any given day, not according to what they preferred to eat. Number 11. Buttermilk biscuits from real buttermilk. Buttermilk was not a purchased product. It was the liquid left after churning butter. Every time butter was made, buttermilk was produced. The buttermilk was used in baking because it was available, and because its acidity reacted with baking soda to create light, fluffy biscuits. Buttermilk biscuits were not a recipe choice. They were the use of a byproduct that would otherwise be fed to pigs. The biscuits appeared whenever butter was made, which was weekly or twice weekly, depending on cream accumulation. The rhythm of butter making determined the rhythm of buttermilk biscuit availability. Number 10. Fried chicken from a rooster. When chickens were hatched, approximately half were roosters. A flock needed only one rooster. The excess roosters were eaten. Young roosters, 4 to 6 months old, were tender enough to fry. The roosters were killed, plucked, cut into pieces, and fried in lard. This meal appeared throughout summer as young roosters reached eating size. The chicken cost nothing because it was raised on the farm. Fried chicken was not a Sunday special. It was the inevitable use of roosters that served no purpose as egg layers, and could not all be kept as breeding birds. First pattern break. Here is what farm cooking actually required, not recipes. Recognition. The farm wife needed to recognize when the lettuce was about to bolt, when the hen had stopped laying, when the pork needed to be eaten before it spoiled, when the apples were ripe enough to cook, but not so ripe they would turn to mush. Recognition came from observation. Daily observation. You walked the garden every morning. You checked the chickens. You monitored the root cellar. You knew what you had by looking at it, not by checking a list. The observation created knowledge that could not be written. A recipe can tell you to use 3 cups of flour. A recipe cannot tell you that the biscuit dough looks wrong and needs more liquid. That knowledge comes from making biscuit dough hundreds of times and developing the recognition that this particular batch is too dry. The lost farm dishes cannot be recreated from recipes because the recipes did not exist. The dishes existed as responses to conditions. The only way to recreate them is to recreate the conditions. Plant a garden that produces inconsistently. Raise chickens that stop laying at unpredictable intervals. Slaughter an animal and face the necessity of using every part immediately. The conditions created the knowledge. The knowledge created the dishes. Remove the conditions, and the knowledge becomes irrelevant. That is why these dishes are lost. Not because people forgot recipes, but because the conditions that made the dishes necessary no longer exist. Number 9. Pickled eggs. When chickens laid heavily in spring and summer, producing more eggs than could be used fresh, the eggs were hard-boiled and stored in a vinegar brine. Pickled eggs lasted for months without refrigeration. The eggs were eaten as snacks, with meals, or taken to the field for lunch. Pickling happened in spring, when egg production peaked. The pickled eggs carried the spring abundance into fall and winter, when production dropped. A jar of pickled eggs cost approximately 30 cents for the vinegar and spices. The eggs came from the chickens. The preservation method created food security by capturing surplus and storing it for scarcity. Number 8. Sauerkraut. When cabbages were harvested in fall, there were more cabbages than could be eaten fresh. The cabbages were shredded, salted, packed into crocks, and left to ferment for several weeks. The fermented cabbage, sauerkraut, lasted through winter without refrigeration. People did not understand the fermentation as beneficial bacteria creating probiotics, even though that is what happened. They understood it as a preservation method that kept cabbage edible for months. A crock of sauerkraut cost nothing except the salt, which was approximately 10 cents per pound, and 1 pound of salt would preserve 20 pounds of cabbage. Sauerkraut appeared at meals throughout winter, providing vitamin C when fresh vegetables were unavailable. Number 7. Milk gravy. With meat drippings. Every time meat was fried or roasted, drippings remained in the pan. The drippings were never discarded. Flour was stirred into the hot fat. Milk was added and the mixture cooked until thick. The gravy was served over potatoes, bread, or biscuits. Milk gravy appeared at every meal where meat was cooked. The gravy stretched the meat's value by creating a sauce that made plain starches taste like meat, even when the meat itself was eaten. The gravy cost nothing because it used fat that would otherwise be discarded, and milk that the farm produced. The technique was so fundamental, it was not taught explicitly. You watched your mother make it and learned through observation. Number 6. Creamed corn scraped from the cob. Farm wives cut the kernels from the cob, but instead of cutting cleanly through, they scraped the knife down the cob to pull out the milky liquid inside each kernel. The kernels and that liquid were cooked with butter and milk until thick and creamy. The scraping released starches that thickened the dish without adding flour. Creamed corn showed up in late summer when the corn was ripe. The dish used ears that were too mature to eat fresh off the cob, but not yet dried for cornmeal. The timing window was narrow, perhaps 2 weeks. Creamed corn happened during those 2 weeks, and not at any other time. The calendar and the corn determined when the dish appeared. Number 5. Ham hock and beans. Ham hocks, the ankle portion of the hog's leg, were mostly bone and connective tissue with minimal meat. They were too bony to serve as meat, but perfect for flavoring beans. The ham hock simmered with dried beans for hours, and the collagen from the connective tissue dissolved into gelatin that enriched the bean broth. The small amount of meat on the hock was divided among the servings. A pot of ham hock and beans cost approximately 15 cents for the beans. The ham hock came from preserved pork. The dish fed 8 people and was the standard winter dinner. The ham hock was not a preferred cut. It was the use of what remained after better cuts had been eaten. Number 4. Potato pancakes from leftover mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes that remained after dinner were mixed with an egg, if there was one, formed into cakes, and fried for breakfast. The pancakes used leftovers that would otherwise be reheated as mash or fed to animals. The transformation through frying created a different dish from a different meal. The potato pancakes cost nothing because they used food that already existed. They appeared at breakfast following any dinner where mashed potatoes had been served. The appearance was responsive, not planned. You made them because leftover potatoes existed, not because you wanted potato pancakes. Number 3. Chicken and biscuits with cream gravy. When a chicken was stewed until the meat was tender, the chicken was removed, and the broth was used to make cream gravy. Biscuits were baked. The chicken meat was shredded and served on the biscuits, with the cream gravy poured over everything. This was Sunday dinner. The chicken came from the farm's chickens. The milk for the gravy came from the cow. The biscuits were made from flour, lard, and buttermilk. The only purchased ingredient was flour. The meal cost approximately 40 cents for the flour and served 8 people. Chicken and biscuits represented the farm meal for company, the meal that showed you had plenty, even when plenty meant you had chickens and a cow. Number 2. Green beans canned in jars with pork fat. In summer, when green beans produced heavily, the beans were packed raw into glass jars with a piece of pork fat, sealed, and processed in a boiling water bath. The pork fat provided flavor and some preservation benefit. The jars lasted through winter. Opening a jar of green beans in January meant having fresh-tasting vegetables when the garden was frozen. A batch of 20 jars cost approximately $1 for jar lids, the only purchased item. The beans came from the garden. The pork fat came from preserved pork. The canning created food security by moving summer abundance into winter scarcity. The technique required understanding heat processing, seal verification, and storage. The knowledge was considered essential. A farm wife who could not can successfully risk her family's nutrition through winter. Second pattern break. Here is what happened between 1950 and 2000 that made improvised farm cooking obsolete. Refrigeration, transportation, year-round produce availability. The seasonal limitations that forced improvisation disappeared. You no longer had to use lettuce before it bolted because you could buy lettuce year-round. You no longer had to eat liver on slaughter day because you could freeze it. You no longer had to can vegetables in summer because frozen vegetables were available in winter. Each technological advancement reduced the necessity for improvisation. Each reduction in necessity created loss of knowledge. When you can buy chicken breasts year-round, you lose the knowledge of what to do with an old hen. When you can buy pre-ground meat, you lose the knowledge of how to make sausage from scraps. When you can buy pickles, you lose the knowledge of lactofermentation. The technologies were improvements. The improvements created dependencies. We gained convenience. We lost capability. A modern cook who loses electricity loses the ability to cook because the refrigerator stops working and the frozen food thaws. A farm cook in 1940 who lost electricity was inconvenienced, but not crippled. Her cooking methods did not depend on refrigeration. The food she had was the food that would keep without refrigeration, or was meant to be eaten immediately. The loss of electricity meant adjusting, not failing. The modern kitchen is more comfortable and more efficient than the farm kitchen. The modern kitchen is also fragile. The farm kitchen operated under conditions of constant uncertainty. The garden might produce or might fail. The chickens might lay or might not. The weather might cooperate or might destroy. Cooking adapted to the uncertainty. The modern kitchen operates under conditions of assumed certainty. The store will have what you need. The refrigerator will keep it cold. The recipe will work if you follow it. The certainty makes planning possible. The certainty also makes adaptation unnecessary. We have optimized for the best case scenario. The farm kitchen was designed for the worst case scenario. Which approach is better depends on whether you think the future will resemble the recent past, or whether disruption is possible. Number 1. Whatever vegetable produced too much, preserved in vinegar. At the top of this list is not a specific dish, but the general principle that governed farm cooking. Whatever the garden produced in excess was preserved. Cucumbers became pickles. Beets became pickled beets. Onions became pickled onions. Peppers, cauliflower, green beans, anything that threatened to spoil before it could be eaten was packed into jars with vinegar, salt, sugar, and spices, then sealed. The preserved vegetables lasted through winter. They provided vegetables when fresh vegetables did not exist. Preservation happened in response to surplus. You did not plan to pickle cucumbers. You pickled cucumbers because the garden produced 40 cucumbers in 1 week, and you could not eat 40 cucumbers. Modern food safety guidance says that vinegar alone may not create sufficient acidity to prevent botulism. The farm method used vinegar with salt and brought the mixture to boiling before pouring it over the vegetables. The combination of acid, salt, and heat created preservation that worked. The method kept families healthy for centuries. No one died from pickled vegetables made this way. The modern warnings suggest that our ancestors were taking foolish risks. The alternative explanation is that the method worked and we have become overly cautious. The pickled vegetables represented the farm approach to all food. Use what you have. Preserve what you cannot use immediately. Adapt to conditions. Waste nothing. These principles created cooking that was responsive rather than planned, seasonal rather than year-round, and utterly dependent on the cook's knowledge rather than on written recipes. The cooking worked. It kept farm families fed through conditions that would defeat modern cooks who depend on recipes and consistent ingredient availability. The cooking disappeared because the conditions that required it disappeared. The knowledge disappeared with the practice. Here is the challenge. Look at your refrigerator and pantry. Identify the 3 most abundant items. Now plan a meal using only those 3 items, plus salt, fat, and heat. No recipes, no looking up instructions. Just recognition of what those ingredients are and what can be done with them. This is farm cooking. You start with what you have, not with what you want to make. Most modern cooks cannot do this. They can follow a recipe that requires specific ingredients in specific amounts. They cannot improvise a meal from whatever exists. The inability is not stupidity, it is lack of practice. Farm cooking was practiced daily. Modern cooking is practiced occasionally while following written instructions. Ask a farm wife from 1940 how to make something, and she would ask what you have. Tell her you have eggs, milk, and flour, and she would tell you 6 different things you could make. Ask a modern cook the same question, and they would ask what recipe you are following. The difference is the difference between knowledge and instruction following. Both have value, but only one functions when conditions change. Drop what you made from 3 ingredients in the comments. I want to know if anyone successfully improvised a meal without recipes, or whether everyone gave up and ordered food. These lost farm dishes cannot be recreated by following recipes. They can only be recreated by recreating the mindset that made them. The mindset that says food is whatever you have today, cooked in whatever way makes it edible, served because eating matters more than whether the meal matches your preferences. That mindset kept farms running and families fed. The mindset has almost entirely disappeared. Whether its disappearance represents progress or loss depends on whether you think abundance is permanent or whether scarcity might return.